Yeah, welcome on behalf of the Om Foundation Inner Science to our today's broadcast of Meeting with Teachers Online with OMC Parkin and Regina Sara Ryan. My name is Isabel and I'm happy to be with you here tonight. The topic of today is perspectives of the Guru. And Om and Regina will exchange ideas about the Guru and the Guru principle. But before they do that, I would like to give a little introduction to the teachers. Some of you may already know Regina, as she has visited Gudzansdorf Monastery in autumn 2023 for a conference here, Living in a Practice. She's an American spiritual teacher and a long-time disciple of Lee Lozowick, a Western Baul master. And she has a very interesting life story. Her spiritual journey began as a Catholic nun in a monastery. But then she left the monastery and started to explore contemplation and mysticism across various spiritual traditions. When she met her guru, Lee Lozowick, more than 40 years ago, she became his true devotee until his death in 2010 and beyond. So if somebody is qualified to speak about the Guru, it is Regina. She herself describes her path as one of unashamed devotion, combining deep inner practice with a wholehearted engagement in everyday life. She's also a seminar leader and the author of numerous books. Om is a realized master of the silent tradition, and he brings together Eastern Advaita and the teachings of the Fourth Way. After a serious car accident, where he had a profound experience of egolessness, his Satguru Gangaji guided him on the path toward the final realization of the self. She referred him to her Advaita teacher Papaji, who was a direct disciple of Ramana Maharshi, and who gave him his name, his spiritual name, Om. Om has been guiding students on the path for nearly 30 years now. He's also the initiator of the Om Foundation Inner Science, director of the Mystery School and the Alliance School of the Fourth Way, and the founder of Gudzansdorf Monastery. And before I pass on to Om now, I would like to say a few words about the format. This evening, those of you joining us via Zoom are welcome to post your questions in the chat, including your name, please. Your questions will be picked up and addressed. Yeah, and today's meeting with Teachers Online is a little special because some of Om's disciples are here with us in the studio joining us for the conversation. So if there is time after the online questions, it may be possible for them to ask questions as well. If you're watching on YouTube, you can decide at any time to switch over to Zoom and join us too. How this works you can find in the text below the video. Well, so now we're excited about the conversation ahead. I will hand over to Om, and before Om joins us, let's be a moment in silence together. And at the end, I ask you to stay a little while because there will be one more announcement. I wish us a very interesting and fruitful evening.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good, good. You're not in the ashram?
I am at the ashram, but I'm down below in my small studio because there's no internet service up at the ashram. We're off grid.
Off grid.
Yeah. So down here at the bottom of the hill, we have internet connections. And so I'm sitting in my little editorial office.
Mm.
It's nice to see you again, Om. Thank you so much
Good.
for this invitation. I'm really honored.
Good. Well, this is not a prepared talk. So the only preparation I made, I read your article today, and as I think Katrin told me that you had a look also in the chapter about the guru-disciple relationship in the book Intelligence of Awakening. That's why I also had a look. I didn't read it completely, of course, but I had a look into a certain aspect. And this aspect is also mentioned in your article, so this is something we could talk about. It's about in my material, it's called the three hindrances, the three obstacles in the guru-disciple relationship. Of course, it's not about three obstacles in the relationship, it's only about three obstacles in the mind that avoid the relationship. But I'm open, to just let this conversation flow. There are a few aspects which I find interesting in your material. I could start if you like, but you could also start with a question if you prefer.
Well, yes, I did have an opportunity to read that chapter again, and it's really a stellar piece of work, which I remember when I was initially reading the book that you sent years ago, that I printed it out and I started passing it around to people saying, you have to read this chapter. It's really amazing for anybody who's in a guru-devotee relationship. So I thank you for that piece of work. And I reread my own article, which I'd written several months ago, and I was surprised that I was as articulate as I was. It always surprises me when I read something back and I said, oh, I actually wrote that. That's not so bad. But
well, the question is, who wrote that?
Yes. That's really true. I find that so much in this work. But I must say that in the excitement of this moment, if you would reiterate those three obstacles, maybe I would be able to jump off on that or formulate a question, or we can just start talking about them.
We could. But to begin with, maybe as an introduction, I would just say a few words about about the concept of the guru principle. Mm-hmm. You mentioned this concept in your article also, and I know where it comes from. This woman was also with Lee for a while, so she mentioned this concept in one of her books. But my understanding about this concept is that we don't need this concept. It's a concept that is only a theory because it's very simple to understand the guru principle. the Guru principle is nothing else than the Guru itself. Yes, and then in the Guru, which is not a personal concept, it's not even a human concept. It is an entity that is possibly emanating through some human beings, but also, as we know, through other objects like a mountain, Ramana. So it's a concept, the Guru principle is just the immanent way of being of this cosmic entity. The Guru might be a different name for God. It is in our tradition a name for the self, Brahman and the self. So I would reject this concept of the Guru principle because it is immanent within the Guru, and the temptation is to find positive demeanors, positive visible aspects which could be defined, in which the Guru could be seen. But the truth is, there are no visible aspects which can be part of the definition of the Guru. The Guru is absolutely unknown, completely unknown, derives from the silent mind, and every attempt to find positive manifestations like an open heart or generally loving being, as an example, all this does not lead and does not serve to define the Guru. It's true that, the Guru, this is also a definition that you're giving. It relates to the original etymology of this term in the Sanskrit. The one who has the capacity to, lacking a word now, to darkness, I'm just lacking a word. Vertrauen, to dispel. This is one of my students. To dispel darkness, yes. So this is true and relates to the immanent capacity of consciousness itself. But this is something I wanted to say right at the beginning. There is no need to find positive definitions of the Guru, because the Guru derives from a silent, completely silent mind. And what can be seen of the Guru is completely and absolutely unknown. My personality is very different to Lee's. And the tradition I work in is also different. I realized this again when I wrote your article. There is a different taste. It's not so much the taste of the Zen tradition. It's very much a taste of the Bhakti tradition. The taste is different. The teaching and the final teaching will be the same. Is there anything you would like to add about the Guru principle?
Well, just to say that considering what you've just said, I will take that into consideration. A lot of the way that I work with myself and with the people that I encounter is I'm an old elementary school teacher, and I'm looking for ways to simplify something that's incredibly complex.
Mm.
Or without experience, how could one explain many, many aspects of life? So for me, when I came across the definitions or the extrapolations of this idea of a guru principle, it worked for me in the sense of being able to speak about the guru to those who might not have experience, just to give them some little thread to hold on to. But I do understand. Well, I hear what you have just said. Whether or not I fully understand it will be revealed. But I have no objection to what you've said, and I think it's very interesting consideration. I do think, from my own experience, that it is beyond the ability to explain. And as many of us as students have learned, bring friends or revealing to our friends that we have a guru, unless that one has sat in that one's presence, and even sometimes, many times, one has no form of relationship to that. I think you made that point very clearly in your chapter when you talked about the reactivity of Carl Jung with regard to Ramana Maharshi.
Mm.
Never having had that direct experience, one could not explain that. So thank you.
Well, simply said, I would suggest, yes, we can talk about the guru itself and give some light to this concept, but we don't really need the concept of the guru principle, because the guru principle is the guru itself.
Mm-hmm.
I guess when we talk about the guru, we talk about the Satguru. We don't talk about all the other gurus. So I think one very important concept to understand, talking about the guru in the personal form, is that the guru is an impersonal being. So you said in your article, and this I would underline, the guru has a personal aspect and it has an impersonal aspect. But what is meant by personal aspect? Or what do you mean by the personal aspect of the guru? Or what is your understanding of the personal aspect which might be included in the impersonal aspect of the guru?
Yes. So in my own experience with Lee as my guru, and with Yogi Ram Sarat Kumar as his guru, there were many, many times when he exchanged with me at a very personal level about my relationships, about my finances, even about where I was going to move. There were many ways in which his rock and roll persona became a stumbling block for me at times and for other people at times. So these aspects, and also he would very much admit his upbringing and somewhat he would even call himself Victorian in some ways, which seems paradoxical to the way in which he acted all the time. But so there were these personality aspects. There were the ways in which he was intervening in our lives at a very hands-on, on a very hands-on level. And then there was the way in which he was simply, that's the space for me. And that was that is the best way I could describe the impersonal aspect. That he was a tangent point and an open space whereby I could enter into something beyond what my rational mind could grasp.
Yes, I understand. I mean, the personal aspect of the guru in human form.
Mm-hmm.
We could say that, you know, there is an incarnated form
Mm-hmm.
which reveals a certain way of being. It might have a male body, or it might a body that is called female. And this form has certain ways of being, certain ways of behaving, certain aspects, certain energies that are related to the original source energies like fire, air, earth, and water. So every manifestation is a certain dynamic circle of original powers. So let's say maybe in the guru, this is his person, this person is personal, and this person is not being ruled by an entity called mind. So it is not ruled by ideas. This is not what people call personal. When I ask a disciple, what do you think, what makes you personal? You know, just look at what is making you a personal human being. Then it is not a certain way of being, a certain manifestation, but it is a story of a kind of spider web which consists of ideas, which we call the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually the mind that makes a person personal.
Mm-hmm.
No mind, there is nothing personal.
Mm-hmm.
Because what is personal, meaning the manifestation of the form, the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual, all of this is just an emanation of an impersonal source. No mind, nothing personal. There is still a personality, but the personality is not personal, not in the way the student identified as being personal. How did Lee relate to this concept I'm just describing? Or how do you relate to that?
Well, you know, the ability to hear or see who that was has only emerged for me over a long period of time. So he would say things that were enigmatic, and he would say things like that person, that one Lee, or that Lee Lozowick person, you know, or that Lee Lozowick guy, you know. And because he was so dynamic and funny in so many ways. I have to keep personalizing this because I don't know what other people were doing. But I often would just laugh and, what does that mean? And what does that even matter? And so in you addressing that question to me, that immediately comes to my mind, and that recognition. And as I've been with him now for a long time, and I'm revisiting some of his earliest teachings, and as the years go by, more and more, I'm amazed at what I didn't see, what I didn't hear, what I didn't understand, because at the time I was so fascinated with this external persona, as well as with this internal sense of this heart opening that was, happening around him, me all the time. So I have to say that he was, and in his poetry to Yogi Ram Sarai Kumar, he consistently eschewed the idea that it was a Lee personality. He would call himself, an arrogant fool, but otherwise he was identifying. He was speaking and writing that he was only an empty space in which Yogi Ram Sarat Kumar's grace was manifesting. So those are some of the thoughts that occurred to me in response to what you said.
Well, the guru has, in human form, has a personality. This is clear, and it cannot be avoided as long as the incarnation is happening. There is a personality, there is a persona. But, this persona is not functioning in the same way as the persona of a normal human being. Mm. What I said is that it doesn't have the same, it has the same source. Every human being, every persona has the same source, but in the reality of people, they have an own source. But there is also something else I would like to mention. That is that the persona of the guru can change in unpredictable ways. You see, one of the illusions of the I in human beings is that people believe that this I is constant in a way. It's a lasting, stable entity that stays all my life or even longer. This is an illusion. If the concept of the I is evaporating, then the stableness, in a way, the stableness of certain personal aspects is no longer given. The personality can change all the time because there are different powers that work through this personality. And even in the flow of time, personality can change completely in unpredicted ways. Not like in a normal human being, because the belief of the constant I is keeping the personality in a false, lasting, way. Do you know what I like to say?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yeah. So it's not really for a lasting relationship with the guru. It's the fascination of the personality could be an introduction, but it's not the final initiation. You know, people get too enthusiastic and too addicted to what they can see with their eyes. Sometimes they might say, feel with my heart, but not even that. It is important to go even deeper and not being bound to the fascination of personality aspects which can be seen with physical eyes or even emotional eyes.
We would often take the idea of a shaman or a shapeshifter, apply it to Lee as far as his personality aspects that he was manifesting to us. And he himself would sometimes actually admit that, for instance, he would say, Krishna has been working here with you for so many years, but you're not moving. So now you're going to get the Haruka, the crazy wild man. And then, we'd be going to India and we would see him completely as nothing but a devotee in relationship to Yogi Ram Surat Kumar. And we would be, we were so used to the kind of I definition of who we thought he was or who he was manifesting as. He was the guru, he was the authority figure for us, and he completely laid himself at the feet of Yogi Ram Surat Kumar and surrendered in his words and in his bodily behavior. So yes, and I think there's still a huge adolescent relationship to the guru within any kind of a large community. It would not be hard to show that. And part of it is that adolescent who is holding on to one of those aspects. And somebody else in the group is holding on to another one of those aspects. And then we're wondering why we're having conflicts with each other. Because we haven't, some of us, let me speak from my own experience. My experience is that observing that it's a source of blockage, a blockade. You can't get through to the other side. You can't get through to the deeper underlying guru that you're referring to from the get-go here. I don't know if that's of any additional insight into my experience here, but we played a lot of different games, and we are still holding on to some of those as if that was the whole thing.
Well, there are two kinds of clinging that could be differentiated. One is, of course, the positive, what you called, I was completely fascinated about some, aspects of his personality. This a kind of falling in love with the guru, believing that this is the guru, but it's not yet the guru. And of course, then there is another way of becoming attached without seeing the guru, the negative clinging, what you called, I think you made this, you alluded, I stumbled upon some aspects of his rock and roll personality or something you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you mean by stumbled?
Well, I was never a fan of rock and roll. I was in the convent when all of that was happening. So I missed the 60s in America, where my friends were out in San Francisco, and I wasn't. I was, cleaning Venetian blinds in the convent and saying the name of Jesus with every every movement, you know.
Your friends were in Woodstock while you were in the monastery
Exactly.
praying, right?
Although we did take some of the old rock and roll songs and make them change the lyrics and sing them at mass with a guitar. That was one of our big revolutionary acts. But yeah, no. So I didn't have rock and roll. Was not my thing, and everybody else loved rock and roll. They listened to it. I didn't continue to listen to it. I didn't even know all these people. Of course, I knew a few, Bob Dylan and so on, but. Yeah, and then there was the environment in which these rock and roll shows would happen. We were in, you know, Ratskellers in Berlin with smoke and, you know, drunk people hanging around. And I'm doing my best to play this game and to, you know, to support this this work project. I'm a good supporter. And then, you know, as I think I mentioned in the article, there are some times when his sexual power and the power of just that music and what rock and roll does with, you know, be like, I would feel the energy of them coming off the stage, and it was shocking. So is this my guru? What's he doing here? How is this for me? How does this work for me? But the fact that I knew enough to know that I, as a Catholic nun, I knew that there were so many restrictions that I had adopted as far as my behavior and demeanor and what was good and what was moral and what was right. And so they were being challenged, and they were being shattered in some ways by some of these things. So yeah, I came up against a lot of things in the course of his rock and roll persona experiences.
Yes, I believe that you were led to non-sattvic places and maybe also to places of the underground.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand perfectly what you mean. So this is exactly the challenge of personas that work on many, many different levels, from the lowest to the highest. I understand.
Well, can I add one more thing? And that is that although it shook me up, I didn't leave. And there's something about I don't know if it's faith or just grace that held me in place and held many of my friends in place, whereas some easily were turned away from that. So today, in my aging years, I look back and I just have nothing but gratitude for having stayed the course, and whatever it was that assisted me in staying the course and working my way through that. I have just incredible gratitude for that. So it was evidently all throughout all of that, the guru was present, because I couldn't have justified or managed all of that unless there was something much deeper that was holding me in place, holding this one in place.
Exactly. Why did you stay, you see, and other people don't stay? This is actually exactly the question which would lead us to the concept of the three hindrances, the three obstacles I was mentioning in my book. And this is a very good question. How is it that some people stay and other people don't stay? Because they fail to meet the temptation. So, you see, I would like to quote one of your sentences, this brings us to my written concept of the three obstacles. I will say something about the three obstacles then. No one who works closely with the master will not be stripped, ripped, and faced with the brick wall of her own resistance. This is quite a harsh sentence, isn't it?
Yeah.
No one who works closely with the master will not be stripped, ripped, and faced with the brick wall of her own resistance. What is the brick wall?
Well, the brick wall is the identification with who she thinks she is and what she thinks she's doing here and what she's supposed to be doing here. Her concepts, her beliefs. It's, and that sentence applied while I was with him, and it continues to apply after his passing. It's 15 years since he died, and this is still the case. Whenever I come up against something that just hits the identification, attachment of who this Regina is, it's always like you just got hit on the head. It's always like I just got hit on the head. I have enough context at this point to turn to that one and just open myself to what do I need to see here? What is this? And stay with it long enough to, and sometimes it takes just a few hours or a few minutes or a few hours. Sometimes it takes days and days to get what is that's being challenged here, what it is that's being struck at. So yeah, it's identification with this, who one thinks one is, who I think this really is.
Yes, this brick wall. If this now in the book. See, this brick wall, I will make it short to just give an introduction. I will not read the whole chapter, of course, but this brick wall, according, to the fourth way and the wisdom of the fourth way. The fourth way has knowledge about the law of three, which is the principle of manifestation itself, and it has also knowledge about the law of seven, which is the dynamic interaction of the law of three. So everything that manifests has to obey the law of three. The mind also, but the mind is, we could call a distortion or an alienated manifestation of the law of three. So the mind also works in this threefoldness. So there will be three basic distortions, three basic hindrances, three obstacles. So what we could do is we could just, I just mentioned 2 or 3 sentences, and then we could, talk about that. Number 1 is, its honor will be injured. Translated, this means that its vanity will be wounded. My feelings are hurt. I do not feel understood. you don't see me, you do not understand me. It's even worse, you traumatize me and you re-traumatize my own past. So you see, these are typical words of our time, where everybody feels so traumatized. And, as everybody is so traumatized, we have to really be pitiful and feeling about this person. And if we don't feel with this story, it means that there is a lack of empathy. Of course, the childish translation of this story is lying about the original injury of vanity. Somebody's talking about these words, oh, I feel so hurt about this. What he really means is, my vanity is hurt. This is number one.
Well, certainly I've seen that and heard that complaint from lots of others, and I've certainly made it myself. So, some of it, in my case, started out with being praised, honored. Oh, I'm so happy to have you, and you can do this and edit these books, and drawing, elevating what was probably a very uncertain and doubtful person coming into this situation. And then, as time went on, not too long, then all of a sudden the attention gets diverted to someone else. So what about me? Am I not that wonderful, serving, exciting, intelligent addition to this Sangha now, or to my guru's work? There was a time when I used to get the books that people would send in for our publishing company to publish, and I got 2 books from a he was a Sufi teacher in California who Lee knew, and he was like a friend of Lee's. And Lee said, "Okay."
Von Lee.
No, it wasn't him. It was Robert Fraser.
He's also written some books.
Yeah, sent us 2 books. So Lee said, "Okay, read these and let me know what you think." And so I read the 2, and I said, "Definitely don't publish this one. It's but definitely publish the other one." And Lee looked at me and he said, "Okay, we'll publish the one you didn't like." And that was, it was like your way of viewing things is so skewed and so constricted that you don't get what's happening here. And evidently in his experience with me, although he kept me in the job for all those years, but his experience with me was that I had such a preconceived notion of what was good and what was not good, And so he said, we'll publish the other one. So. My vanity was definitely wounded.
I remember a story, that happened when I was with Papaji in India. Something that irritated many people. There was an American woman. She was related with a Russian artist. And this Russian artist, he was painting while he was there in Lucknow. And one day they arrived at Papaji's gate. She had been beaten up in a way. There was blood running down her face. And I was not a personal witness, you know. This is just a story I was told from other disciples. And then, yeah, she was in a bad state. She was crying. She was in the state of a victim. She became a victim. When Papaji opened the gate, he didn't look at her at all. He just ignored her completely and just gave his whole attention to the man who was with her. So the moralistic interpretation, the moralistic observer is stunned by what is happening. You know, how could he? So obviously, you know, there was something invisible for the ordinary observers and witnesses. So what was visible was not the point of the true core of what happened. The true core is always invisible, meaning there is something happening in the mental, invisible world. Vanity in the belief of an ordinary person should be visible in some way. But the truth about vanity is it's visible in many different ways. And the ways vanity can be visible, these ways are unlimited. You know that being dressed as a nun and behaving as a nun doesn't mean to be beyond vanity at all. So we cannot really link vanity to something that is visible in a person. But the master obviously sees what is invisible. So this is, you know, just a short story that happened with Papaji, where obviously the vanity was hurt. And the wounds of the body were not as significant as the wound of the vanity. This was her teaching in this moment. I cannot even tell you whether she got the teaching or not. I'm just telling you this short story, you know.
You remind me of one of my own stories I haven't thought of in a long time. He had a conference out in Los Angeles. It was going to be one of our community celebrations, and I was very new to the Sangha. But I was also one of the ones who was being praised and, you know, put in the spotlight sometimes. So I went out to Los Angeles for this conference, and I had just had my teeth fixed. I had just had braces put on my teeth because they were all crooked. And he came up to me to give me a hug, and I covered my mouth. And I said, Oh, I'm sorry, but I just had braces put on my teeth. As I'm hugging him, I'm saying, I'm admitting my intense vanity. And he just stood back and he smiled very sweetly. And he just said, I'm never looking at that when I look at you.
Okay, number 2.
Mhm.
The ego of the disciple feels threatened and views the teacher as an enemy. Viewed through the child's eyes, the teacher becomes evil. Any comments on that?
This is a very interesting exchange because as I'm exchanging with you, I'm having all sorts of flashbacks. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate this. You're demonstrating you're demonstrating your skillful means with me. So thank you for that. Well, to think that I didn't also come to him with these deep fears and guilt of abandoning, if I was, my Christian God idea, or my idea of a saintly Jesus, compassionate Mother Jesus or something, and then to be confronted with some of the ways that he spoke to people, worked with people, gave talks in general, challenging all of this. He loved that song, that Mick Jagger song, Sympathy for the Devil. And it was, there was that kind of mystique about it. I mean, is he really who he claims to be? Is he really who I'm being drawn to? Or is this some massive diabolical wasn't a word I would use, but some massive distraction from the true path? So I can't say that this was an enduring motif in my relationship to him, but there certainly was fear that I was being seduced into some kind of an evil way, or less holy, less good way.
Well, it's not your tendency,
Mm.
It's not your tendency.
Yeah.
It's not your vasana.
Right.
You see, because these 3 obstacles, they derive from the knowledge of the 4th way that can be seen through the teachings of the Enneagram also.
Mm-hmm.
So it contains this knowledge of specific tendencies which are not working through every person in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your tendency so
Mm-hmm.
much,
Well, it certainly is manifested in some of the people around me at the time when I was aligning myself with Lee's teaching. There was this sense of the fear of that something evil or something bad was going to happen to me because I was diverting myself on the path. I remember one of my brothers, very strong Christian, not even necessarily talking about my relationship to Lee, but the fact that I was no longer following that straight path, that I was going to go to hell. Just that clearly.
I remember some, moments where some students said to me, in that moment, I did not know whether I was dealing with the guru or with Hitler. But I remember something else, when I visited your community, I remember Mary Angelon talking about the way Lee used to structure his talks. I mean, the first part is actually provoking this obstacle and getting rid of all the people he did not want to have in the talk. She made this example, when he was giving this talk in Belgium, he started to talk about Belgian chocolate, which was the worst and the worst shit of the world. And, everything, what was absolutely bad and scruffy in Belgium. And, it was really as a Belgium identification sitting in this talk. It was a shock. And then she said, this lasted maybe half an hour. After half an hour, 50% of the people left. And after 50% of the people had left, suddenly the personality changed completely. He was very soft, very loving, and started to really interact with the people still sitting in this. So, this is, the way the guru works. This is the provoking a certain hindrance, a certain, let's call it one of the 3 brick walls. Actually, I like this term you used, because the 3 hindrances can be also named the 3 brick walls in the human being. So I guess this example that you told me from Belgium, that happened in different places, right?
Oh, yes. One of my dear friends was...
Was it embarrassing for you also?
I wasn't at that particular talk, but I have been at other places where it was incredibly embarrassing.
Mm.
I was at a gathering where this woman came. She was very excited to become a part of this wonderful community that she had seen. And she was an activist for a food activist. So Lee began talking about how grateful he was that we were going to start eating dolphins, as part of our diet. And she there was another time he did a conference where my friend Tessa Balecki, who had been Mother Tessa, she had been the Mother Superior of a convent in Arizona, contemplative monastery. And so she was invited to the same conference Lee was invited to. It was going to be about contemplative work and prayer and all this kind of thing. And she was in the audience. And when Lee started his talk, he asked all the men to go to the back of the room and all the good-looking women to come to the front, please, so he could have all the good-looking women to look at, right, as he was in his chair. And she said she knew enough to know his deliberate provocation, so she stayed. But she's the one who reported to me how people just fled, and then he said he gave pristine teaching. So he liked to do that.
Okay, number 3. The ego must defend its power by its self-will, gaining ground through passive resistance or active displeasure. It is a widespread worry of Western free thinkers who cannot distinguish between independence and freedom, that a student who puts himself at the mercy of a spiritual teacher mutates into a spineless creature. So this brings up this is a very hard obstacle. Maybe this brick wall is even harder than the second one or the first one. It is so hard in Western conditioning because this wall has been strengthened by the Age of Enlightenment. This wall is a virtue that has been taught by the Age of Enlightenment. It's called the free will. So you used in your text very often, it's even in the first sentence, it says, and the whole garden will bow. So what does bowing mean for a Western mind?
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk about that. And why is it so necessary? And why is it that the Western mind absolutely does not want to bow? Let me just, I think I found something also in your text about, wait a minute.
The part where I say I loved bowing down.
No, it's where you talk about the Western idea of authority.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. It's actually, I just see it's in this poem you quoted by Lee from 1999.
Yes.
Let me just quote this first sentence. In the West these days, skepticism and cynicism run rampant among the masses. There is a popular credo. It says, question authority. This is the Age of Enlightenment, isn't it?
Yes. And it's
so why how can you bow to authority while you're questioning it?
Yeah.
I mean, this question is more important than it seems.
Yes.
Because it cannot be answered in a very simple way. It can only be answered in a paradox way.
Well, let me just riff on this a little bit, because that's why I called the article "And the Whole Garden Will Bow." It's a line from a E.E. Cummings, and he's talking about his mother and how fine she was. I just got a sign that said my internet is unstable, so if I freeze up, let me know.
It just happened for the first time, but I'm getting you now again. It just happened.
You're getting me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do have my laptop available if I can, if this freezes.
Okay.
So this line from this poem, I read it years and years and years ago, but it always struck me so powerfully that the whole garden, all the flowers, all the trees would bow in reverence to this woman because she was such a fine being. And then, of course, reading a Zen book by another man who was a friend, talking about so many relationships where one would never be willing to bow to the other. In human relationships, would the husband bow down before the wife? Would the wife bow down before the husband? You know, as a gesture of love. It's not something that comes out of your mind. It's something that arises out of the body. A friend of mine said that he would come to Lee's Darshan every week because he had that opportunity to let his body bow before something that he couldn't grasp with his mind. So I think the fact that we talk about how we have to come back to the body and the body is this, but we don't have a deep sense of what actually gives the body incredible joy, or a sense of awe, a sense of wonderment that arises in the body. You see it with children. There's no hesitation to go to the edge of the ocean and just throw themselves down, you know, or raise their arms in adoration of the sky. So for me, one of the reasons why we don't want to bow to another is that we don't have a sense of what truly gives the body a sense of joy, what truly arises as organic joy. It's still all a mental construct. And also because we have the idea that if I go down, that makes me less than the other, rather than that it could actually be a way in, an entry point into a type of union where lovers would bow to each other. That's the first thoughts that are coming to my mind. But I remember myself as a child just like running to the shore of the ocean and just kneeling down because it was so overpoweringly great for me. And I think Dostoevsky has a quote about that, something like, if there was no God, people would bow down to the ocean, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the bowing down is an archetypical movement of the soul. So I have therefore included, for example, in the sacred movements that I teach here, which is a kind of prayer that also has included some aspects of chi work. This archetypical movement is included because it's a movement of the soul, which is natural for the soul. See, yes, it begins physical, and there is a correlation between the physical bowing down and the mental. But of course, the core of the resistance is not in the body. It is in the mental elevation. Can we say that? It's a kind of the mind is finally the highest authority. So the highest authority has no need to bow. Why should the highest authority bow to anything? You see? And this is part of the dramatic misunderstandings or the shadow of the Age of Enlightenment. I have said a lot about this in this book, Intelligence of Awakening, which you know why the Age of Enlightenment is not enlightened. And why the free will is not free. So, yes, Western people, more than Indians, I always have this comparison, I see the Indian culture and I see the Western culture. In India, it's a way, the flip side, the shadow of the flip side is showing you. So because people have the tendency, I mean, I have met Indians, you know, that once they realized, oh, this is a guru, he's coming with disciples and this kind of thing, you know, then they might have a simple tendency to take a position of submission. Submission is not surrender. We have to go beyond false submission, and this is a tendency of the Indian mind. And the false elevation of the Western mind, believing to be the highest authority and feeling in an empowered situation. The Western mind has to give up this power and bow down. The Indian mind has to be, you know, raised in a way. Because of course, the meeting with the guru on the middle path can only be, this is in a metaphorical but also in a practical sense, from eye to eye. So you have to be where the eyes of the gurus are. You see, when you're too high, like the Western student, the Western student cannot look into the eye of the guru because he's too high. The Indian student might be too low. This is just a general tendency. Of course, personalities are different, and in India, in modern India, more and more westernized, you find the Western style just in the same way, you know. But this is just a general way to point to the meeting with the guru on what we call the middle path. Looking into the eyes of the guru. Every kind of false submission has to leave, just as every kind of false arrogance, so that this person is in a position that is not as high as he identifies himself. This is the general Western concept. And nowadays, you know, from the United States, when you look at what happens there during the last 20 years, maybe, there are people who even believe that the age of the guru is coming to an end because they connect the guru with the patriarchal concept, even with the feudal concept, you know, as if it's an old school of aristocrats or aristocratic context. This is really a specific kind of ignorance that is connected to our modern times after Age of Enlightenment. Only all the people who have gone through this evolutionary step of the Age of Enlightenment have to do with this specific obstacle. And this is the Western world. And of course, nowadays, in the mental globalization, also all the rest of the world kind of follows, you know, trying to become westernized.
There's excuse me. I wrote a book at one point called what is it called? The Women Challenge the Lie, it was called. And it's about, I wrote it with a younger woman, and the whole idea of it was that women are so self-deprecating, they're so self-doubtful, they're so, insecure and so on, that they constantly lie to themselves about anything that's really good about them. So what this book came as a result of seeing how people did not have a point of reference for ever being really loved. I mean, they probably were loved, but they don't have a tangent point for recognition of having been loved. Mm. And so that carries on to their own self-hatred. And so the reaction to that whole mentality is self-esteem, power, I trust myself. I just, I hear this all the time. I just trust myself. That's kind of the way it's said.
Self-empowerment.
Yeah, self-empowerment. And, I'm saddened that there's not, without a tangent point for loving or having been loved. And I think that's why so many people were initially found the guru to be so attractive, because they did have an experience with the guru of being loved. And as time goes on, that tangent point is not accessed. It's not sat with, there's not enough just resting in what that was and revivifying it in whatever ways are possible, whether that's through meditation or chanting or just sitting in silence in front of the murti of the teacher or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of where it comes from. It's what gets remembered by me.
Yes, I mean, your point is more specific. I was talking about on a very abstract level about the age of enlightenment, and you were now talking about, a certain specific conditioning of the female mind, or the mind identifying as a woman, as opposed to the mind identifying with a man. But it looks very different on the first sight, but the truth is it's the same story. Because as you just mentioned, there's the moment when the story flips. It's like people come to therapy. Let's say this woman comes to therapy, and the psychologist, works on the strengthening of the self-esteem, and then she comes out of the therapy after, 20 meetings, and what she believes is self-esteem might just be the flip side of the same tendency, you see? So this is a relative realization, but I'm talking about a general Western tendency in men and in women. It's really looking at it from a deeper level. It's the same tendency, Whenever there is self-humiliation, there is always arrogance on the other side. But some people, it's always an oscillation for years, for decades, for lifetimes. It never ends, you see. This oscillation never ends. It's just from one side to the other, from the other side back to the first. So coming back to the middle path and looking into the eyes of the guru, bowing to the higher is not submission. it's reverence. So people have to, first, maybe many Western people have to find a clear intelligence, discrimination between what is submission, what is swooning. I think this is always also something you mentioned in your article, as different sides, and these are linked to the childish eyes. And what is true reverence? A student has to live through you remember the 3 phases of the guru-disciple relationship I mentioned, calling the first one the childish phase, the second one the adolescent, and the third one is, surprisingly enough, the first one where the guru actually emerges. In the first 2 phases, the student might call it the guru, but it's not the guru at all. Well, these were the 3 obstacles. I think this was quite a good, structure to come closer to this concept of the guru. There is no question here. Nobody has any questions. Maybe this is a good sign, because people are just listening. How about you? How are you feeling right now?
Oh, I'm just so pleased to have this kind of exchange with you and to be enlivened in my relationship to my guru and the one guru. So I deeply appreciate this kind of exchange. And the thing I want to say too is that I met Lee in 1983, so do the math, and recognize how long I have been related to him. And I have to say that I feel like a rank beginner in so many ways. Like I'm only discovering the guru now. And I think that's actually not because I didn't have these discoveries all along and so on. A matrix got built. I got, I hit brick walls a lot. But my experience now is that my reverence and my devotion are so much less sticky, or have so much less stuff attached to them, and I just look forward to no top end, as Lee would say. Lee used to use that phrase, no top end. That my relationship to him and my relationship to the path.
No top end. What does that mean?
No top end, T-O-P.
Yes, I understand. But what does it mean? What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, what I understood him to mean was that there's the great process of divine evolution, was a phrase he used. So the revelation of God was always ongoing in every moment. It never had a top end. So in our own work, in my own work, in my recognition and reverence for him, for the guru principle, for the guru, Lee, it just goes on and on.
I understand. Let me just ask here whether anybody has something, wants to mention something. There is no question coming from elsewhere. There's just silence. So let us see, you know, how our connection and relation goes on. um, I will be open to hear your impulses, whatever you would like to share. And
Well, I guess the only thing I would leave with those who are listening is to say that it's very rare what you all have in your lives. There's the presence of a living guru. It is so rare and such a unique gift and grace. And I think somebody once asked Irina Tweedy, the Sufi master, what she would do differently if she could start again. And she said, I would have started earlier. And you know, it's a funny thing to say, but nonetheless, to recognize just how rare and how precious has been the grace that we've been given. Because the more I live and the more I speak to people, the more I just feel such an incredible gratitude for having been called to the path.
I mean, there is a saying, of course, which is known to many students. They have read this sentence in sayings of Indian gurus, for example. It says that the guru manifests when the worthy student is calling. So when there is a true calling, a very deep calling, the guru will manifest. So this is a different topic now, and we don't want to indulge in this right now because we came to an end after after this. But I would just like to say maybe 2 sentences about this. We have had a peak time when gurus manifested. This is more than 25 years ago. You know, when during the 90s of the last century, then moving into the next millennium, there was a peak. There were many very powerful manifestations of gurus, especially also in India, in the Advaita lineage. And this peak is definitely over, and gurus are leaving. The incarnated gurus are leaving the bodies one after the other, and there is not the same power of the guru re-arriving at the moment. We are kind of in a valley at the moment, but talking about we, I mean, who is we, you know? But there is the observation of a kind of valley at the moment, and we do not know how long this valley lasts. But I see definitely a connection with the digital age. You see? I see a connection with the digital age. The more the wisdom of the known is overwhelming the masses of the people, saturating their minds, the more the one preserving the true and final knowledge is leaving the public manifestation. Of course, true knowledge cannot be found in the internet. It cannot be found through artificial intelligence. But we have arrived, and this is really the dark side of the digital age already, and it's very fast. It's faster than everybody thought. We have arrived in a decade, and maybe it's much more than a decade, you know, where the false saturation of limited knowledge, which is from the point of view of the wisdom teachings inessential, is taking place in people. Shortly said, everybody knows gurus are not needed. We don't need gurus. Everyone is a self-empowered column of wisdom. It's not good news, but it has nothing to do with you or with me, you know. I really appreciate so much. I mean, when I look at your life, the flow of your life, you know, the inner space of the Catholic Church and the traditional monasteries is not just a limited space. I mean, this is how politically minded people of nowadays see it. This is just, it's not even half of the truth about the church. People don't understand why I mean, when all this criticism of the Catholic Church, but what did I do 10 years ago? I'm again part of the Catholic Church. Politically minded people have absolutely no understanding about this. Why should I do this when I read what you read and what you write in your books about the Catholic Church? This is absolutely crazy. Why do you give money to this church, you know? I just want to mention this. And this, of course, as you know, I'm also very much doing research on the mental matrix of the digital age. I've written a small book about it, and I will have, and we have done a movie about this, about transhumanism. This is the future, you know. This is where you can see that the humanity is moving into. And these tendencies that all come from California, from the Silicon Valley, are really they have a very dark side, which manifests, they think it's the enlightenment of mankind. The truth is, people are, I'm sorry, I have to say a very ugly word, people are flooded with shit. This is our time. And the digitalization is highly responsible for what is happening. Finally, of course, it's not the digitalization, it's the mind of the people which is tempted to be absorbed with knowledge. And all this knowledge, from the highest point of view of the true knowledge of the wisdom teachings, is just shit. it's inessential and it is feeding the mind. You know, in the 90s, people were hungry. People were hungry. There was a phase where people really were hungry. And this hunger is being fed all the time in a way that is not serving the wisdom teachings and the true knowledge. This is the way it is. It's not nice to say that, is it?
No. The fact that you hold the sanctuary where you are, and that we're attempting to hold the sanctuary where we are, I think is the contribution that I can make.
Serving the seclusion is important in the monastic tradition, and it's not only an outer temple, it's an inner temple. So I appreciate very much that you serve this place, and we try the same here. Let's keep in touch.
Yes, very, very well. Thank you so much for this time. And thank you all for coming and listening. Jai Guru.
Yes, I would like to express my gratitude to Om and to Regina for this conversation and for all these personal insights also. And I want to thank you, everybody who has been here with us. If you would like to support our work and also meeting with teachers online, we would very much appreciate your donation. And how you can donate, you can find on our website and also in the text below the YouTube video. The next meeting with Teachers Online will take place on September 28th. Our guest then will be Prajna Paramita, who is an awakened teacher from the Netherlands, and she will give a live satsang with questions and answers. Prajna Paramita will also visit our monastery in April 26 for a weekend with Om, and it's again on the topic of the Guru. Yes, and as with all previous events, tonight's conversation will remain available in the media library of our new website, as well as on YouTube, so you can rewatch it or recommend it to others, to your friends, and to whom might be interested. And if you would like to stay connected with the foundation, with our work, you're warmly invited to sign up for our newsletter. The link is in the chat and also below the YouTube video. Yes, once again, thank you all. Goodbye for now, and I hope to see you again in September. Thank you and goodbye.